Good afternoon, guys. I'm getting ready to go traveling for the next 6 or 8 months. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I prepare for a long trip abroad. I'm going to try and cover some steps that you might not think about if you've never traveled long-term before. There are quite a few little jobs that you have to take care of before you're ready to hit the road. It can get a bit overwhelming. I've been traveling off and on for the past 14 years, and I've lived as a digital nomad for the past 3 years. In that time, I've developed a pretty good system. So let's get started. First, I select a destination. I consider my budget, my interests, the season. Usually I try to stick to lower cost destinations, at least for the majority of my trip. I also try and visit at least one new country on every trip. So I'm heading to Taiwan next month. After you select a destination, it's important to research the visa situation for your nationality. Make sure the information you have is up to date, because visa policies can change without notice. There are quite a few countries that are visa-free or offer visa on arrival. You want to make sure that your passport won't expire while you're gone. It should always have at least 6 months of validity remaining. That's a common visa requirement. Even if you don't need a visa, there can be some forms you have to fill out. Some countries have an arrival form that you need to submit online before your trip. Visas can be a real hassle. There's just lots of paperwork to fill out. Sometimes you have to mail your passport to and from the embassy or even go in person. They can also get really expensive. A visa could cost hundreds of dollars. That's one of the reasons I haven't gone to Nigeria yet, even though I really want to go, just because the visa process is such a pain. If you're traveling on a one-way ticket, you'll want to make sure that you have proof of onward travel. You could be asked for this when you're checking in for your flight or when you're passing through immigration. You'll also want to make sure that you have proof of accommodation, proof of sufficient funds, proof of insurance. You could be asked for these if they are an entry requirement. Next, I make a budget. I break my budget down into day-to-day costs and big ticket items. So day-to-day costs are things like food, drinks, public transit tickets, accommodation, and big ticket items are things like flights, tours, maybe visas. If you're traveling really long-term, like a year or more, you'll also want to factor in the cost of replacement gear as stuff wears out. At some point, you'll probably need to buy a new pair of shoes, maybe a new phone, stuff like that. It's also a good idea to have an emergency fund, just in case you need to fly home at a moment's notice, or if you have some kind of medical emergency. I think $10,000 is a pretty decent emergency fund for most people. Some people would be comfortable with less, and some people would need more. I set a daily and monthly budget for myself. I make a spreadsheet where I track all of my costs. I don't track every little expense. Instead, I just track ATM withdrawals and credit card bills. On average, I spend around $1,700 per month while traveling. That's including flights and everything, all of my expenses. Next, I book flights. I try to book 4 to 6 weeks in advance if possible. I usually search on Google Flights and then I book directly with the airline. I avoid flights with a layover shorter than an hour and a half, just to make sure I have time to find the gate and that my bag makes it to the next flight if I'm checking luggage. On my first trip abroad, I booked a flight with a really short layover and I made the second flight, but my bag didn't, so that was really stressful. I also factor in the cost of luggage and seat selection when booking a flight. Sometimes budget airlines are actually more expensive if you factor in the extra fees you have to pay. Next, I book accommodation. It's a good idea to at least book your first couple nights before you leave home. That way you have an answer to immigration if they ask where you're going to stay. It also gives you peace of mind knowing where you're going to sleep the first couple nights when you arrive exhausted and jet lagged. I remember when I went to India, I hadn't booked any accommodation, and it was just a huge hassle to find a decent hotel when I arrived. There were so many people trying to scam me. I was exhausted, and yeah, it was just really overwhelming. So now I always make sure I have someplace to stay when I'm arriving from a long flight. I try to book accommodation about a month out when possible. The best places will sell out, especially during busy season. You don't need to book the whole trip in advance. It's nice to be somewhat spontaneous. I usually book hotels through booking.com. If I'm staying someplace for 2 to 4 weeks or more, I'll sometimes stay in an Airbnb. There are some nice weekly and monthly discounts you can get. When I'm traveling in a more expensive country, sometimes I'll stay in hostels, which I usually book through Hostel World. Next, I sort out my banking. Now, this is one of the most important steps, in my opinion. You need to be able to access your money while you're away. So I charge most things through my travel credit card, and I withdraw cash from ATMs with my debit card. It's a good idea to carry at least a couple of debit cards and a couple of credit cards so you have a backup in case one is lost or stolen or damaged. You should also check the expiration dates on your cards before you leave so they don't expire while you're gone. Try to choose cards that don't charge foreign transaction fees. Pretty much every travel credit card will work. I use a Chase card, and for my primary debit card, I use a Schwab card. which refunds ATM fees. I also recommend you carry at least a few hundred to $1,000 in cash for emergencies. These can be converted to the local currency anywhere in the world. You could also bring euros or British pounds. Those are also widely accepted. Next, let's talk about packing. I'm not going to go over my whole packing list. I'll save that for another video. I'll just mention a few things that are easy to forget about. I try to pack relatively light. I carry a 40-liter backpack and a 25-liter day pack. This is carry-on friendly on most airlines. If I'm flying on a budget flight or taking a domestic flight, I may have to check the big bag. I pack my clothing and bulky items in the big bag and my electronics and anything valuable in the small backpack. A few things I always pack are sandals to wear in the shower, a small travel towel, a small clippers to trim my beard. I make sure I have the outlet converters for different style outlets. I make sure I also have the proper chargers and cables for all of my devices. I don't stress too much about packing because anything I could forget, I could buy at my destination. I also highly recommend you carry a backup phone. These days with two-factor authentication, losing your phone could be a major hassle. You could lose access to your banking or communication. You may not be able to access certain accounts, like WhatsApp, for example. A lot of carriers also won't activate a new SIM while you're abroad, so you could have to go home to regain access to your old number. Most of the time I just carry around my spare phone while I'm out sightseeing. I figure I'm more likely to lose my phone while I'm out and about to a pickpocket or thief or something, and my primary phone is safer locked up in my hotel room. I just use whatever my old phone is, so right now I'm using an iPhone 13 as my backup. If you're traveling long term, you might be moving out of your home or your apartment. In that case, you'll have to find a place to store your stuff. So you might have to get a storage unit or store it at a friend's or family member's house. In most cases, it'll be better to get rid of bulky items like cars and furniture rather than paying expensive storage fees, because that could really add up if you're gone for months on end. The next thing you'll want to think about is how you're going to stay in contact with your friends and family while you're abroad. These days, communication is pretty easy. You can just use WhatsApp or iMessage or whatever your favorite messaging app is. You'll also want to make sure everyone who you want to talk to while you're away knows how to reach you. So if your regular number won't work, let everybody know. If grandma doesn't know how to use WhatsApp, teach her or find an alternative option. These days, communication is so much easier than it was when I first started traveling. On my first trip abroad, I didn't bring a phone of any kind. Smartphones really weren't mainstream yet. Most hostels didn't have Wi-Fi. There weren't like eSIMs or international SIMs really. So usually I would use the computers in the hostel common area to email friends and family. Sometimes I'd use Facebook. Sometimes I would pay to make a long distance phone call. I used calling cards occasionally. I remember using a payphone in London. It seems prehistoric now, but that's how travel was like 15 years ago. Your regular phone number may or may not work depending on your plan. There could be expensive roaming fees. You'll want to check with your carrier before you leave. Consider moving to a carrier that offers international service. At the very least, you'll need to be able to receive two-factor authentication texts from your bank. You'll also want to think about how you're going to receive important mail while you're gone. For example, maybe receive tax documents or something like that. You could have that stuff sent to a friend or family member's house, or you could use a mail scanning service. They open your letters and scan them and upload them so you can read them while you're abroad. Before you leave home, you'll want to do a final check to make sure you have all of your important documents, your passport, your credit cards, your visas, all that. It's a good idea to take photos or scan all of those documents and back them up to the cloud or email them to yourself. Also save them on your phone or your computer. Also make sure all of your accounts are locked down. Use strong passwords, use a password manager. Make sure you have backups of everything. Make sure you have working two-factor authentication on the accounts where you need it. If you plan to buy travel insurance, you should buy it before you leave home. Some providers won't sell you insurance if you're already on the road. To wrap things up, there are a lot of little things to do before you leave for a long trip abroad. To me, the most important things to nail down are banking, communications, and visas. Pretty much any other problem can be solved while you're on the road. You don't have to be too paranoid about planning, but it's a good idea to take your time and make sure you have everything wrapped up before you leave. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. That will help me out. I've got more videos in the works. I'm heading to Taiwan in about a month from now. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.